Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Skift Live webinar, presented in collaboration with our partners from Sabre. The title of today's webinar, Are Airlines Ready for a New Era of Retailing? Is not just a rhetorical question. By the end of today's session, we really hope you'll be able to answer this for yourself and understand how to position your company for success. My name is Darren Free, branded content editor with the SkiftX team, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. So joining me today, we have Mike Reyes, SVP Platform Product Management at Sabre, Daniel Friedley, Managing Director and Partner at Travel in Motion, and Umesh Chibber, SVP Revenue, Retail and Cargo at Oman Air. Together, we're going to be digging into the topic of airline retailing. But first, I'd like to give our speakers a chance to introduce themselves. So Mike, let's start with you. Can you just give us a brief overview of Sabre and your role there?
Absolutely. But first, I want to thank Darren and my colleagues here from Travel in Motion, Daniel, as well as Umesh. It'll be great to spend the time together today discussing this. So I represent Sabre. We're a large, if not one of the largest, technology vendors in the travel space. I'm responsible in the product management group for many of the topics we're going to discuss today, including our next-gen retailing solutions for airlines and that transition to full offer and order management. So great to be with you today.
Great, thanks, Mike. And Daniel, tell us more about your role at Travel in Motion.
Yeah, sure. And thanks also for having us here. This is a great opportunity to chat about a subject that's near and dear to our hearts. I'm Daniel Friedley. I'm one of the founders of Travel in Motion. Travel in Motion, what we focus on is really helping airlines and vendors with this, with NDC, with commercial distribution, with strategies, and to help create transformation paths going forward. As this is a big, challenging area that we're all involved in right now.
Great, thanks, Daniel. And Umesh, tell us a little bit about your role at Oman Air.
Hi, Darren. Hi to my colleagues at Sabre, Mike, Daniel. Thank you for the opportunity, Darren, and to Skift. Umesh, I take care of revenue, both on the passenger and cargo side. And recently, I've started taking care of e-commerce and web business and ancillaries.
Excellent.
We started a journey sometime back to bring all the revenue pieces together under a single roof. And yeah, it's been quite a journey so far. So look forward to this webinar and discussions around. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. I'm really excited to dig into this topic with all of you in a few minutes. For our audience, I'd just like to share a bit about what you can expect during this webinar. So first, we're going to set the scene and explore how airline customer preferences are changing. We'll get to the heart of why airline retailing needs to transform to meet consumer expectations and overcome some of the big challenges facing the airline industry today. We'll follow that with a panel discussion, including a quick temperature check on where the airline industry currently stands, a closer look at the strategic, technological, and organizational aspects of airline retailing transformation readiness, and then we'll talk about how you can create your own path for a smooth transition to a traveler-centric retailing model. We'll wrap that up at the end by just taking a few minutes to answer any questions we have from you, our audience. So before we get started, I'd just like to thank today's sponsor, Sabre. I'm sure the company needs no introduction, especially for the audience here today, but Sabre's been a leading technology partner in the travel industry for several decades, and the company has its sights set firmly on building the next generation of airline IT solutions based on offer and order enabled modern retailing. Just a few more housekeeping notes before we dive in. If you're not already familiar with Skift, we are the leading news source for travel executives, and we're on a journey to help you better understand the world's largest industry through our website, events, daily newsletters, and more. As I mentioned, we plan to incorporate some questions from the audience into our panel discussion, and so we'd love your input. Just use the Zoom chat to pose questions to our speakers throughout the talk, and we'll try to cover as many of these as we can at the end of today's session. If you'd like to share any of the insights from today's webinar, don't forget to tag us at Skift and use hashtag SkiftLive. Finally, there will be a video recording of this session available on Skift Live in the coming days. So don't worry, you'll have everything you need to take away from today's webinar at your fingertips on demand. So with that, let's get started. Before we get into the weeds, I think it's important just to step back and ask ourselves, why do airlines need to transform their retailing models in the first place? The airline industry is finding itself at a major inflection point right now, and we'll explore exactly why in the next few slides. As we talked about in our Skift megatrends earlier this year, how we work, live, and travel is merging. And as these lines blur, traveler needs and expectations are evolving, including how we shop and book. Consumers are more invested in e-commerce coming out of the pandemic, and we're more accustomed to personalized offers and marketing thanks to social media. As Vasu Raja at American Airlines said, the more we can give customers a contemporary retailing experience, like what they get with everything else they buy, the more value. So what does a contemporary retailing experience exactly look like? Well, in short, it's more personalized. We expect brands to anticipate what we want and need. Today's airline consumers also want customizable options, greater transparency, and more convenient ways to manage their travel plans. At the same time, airlines are facing staffing challenges, pricing challenges, and operational challenges due to things like capacity constraints and aircraft delivery delays. The airlines need to be smarter and more efficient. They need ways to rise to these industry challenges, meet consumer expectations, and increase profitability. So what is the solution? Well, airlines and travel providers need to move toward a traveler-centric retailing model, one that's enabled by new distribution capability and dynamic offers and orders. So we hear a lot about NDC, but what exactly is it? Well, it's a communication standard created by IATA, the International Air Transport Association, that enables airlines to distribute relevant offers and orders directly to travel retailers, including online travel agencies. The rewards for both travelers and airlines are substantial. Travelers have the ability to save their preferences and purchase the tailored products and services that work best for them. Things like seat selection, extra legroom, and Wi-Fi. They also benefit from more seamless servicing throughout their experience. Airlines benefit by having a more efficient way to sell their products and services that puts them in control of their offers. This can include their own air and air ancillary products, as well as non-air offerings from third-party suppliers, things like lodging, ground transportation, and excursions. Ultimately, transitioning to this modern retailing ecosystem promises to make airlines more competitive, more appealing to consumers, and more profitable. The value creation opportunity from offer and order retailing by 2030, including new revenue opportunities and cost reduction efficiencies, was calculated at up to $40 billion in a McKinsey report from late 2019. So there's certainly a lot at stake here. But this transformation will not happen overnight. There's a long road ahead, and there will undoubtedly be challenges along the way. This new standard requires a big investment of time and money, not to mention organizational changes. So we're going to spend the rest of today's discussion with our panel exploring the various aspects of offer and order retailing, discussing how airlines can prepare now to ensure they're ready to transition to this new standard. And then we're also going to take a look at what a potential high-level transition path could look like. So without further ado, let's kick off this discussion. Mike, I'd like to start with you. What's your take on where the industry is at right now, and what are you hearing from Sabre's airline partners?
Yeah, great question, Darren. So I'll say at Sabre, we certainly take the perspective that air travel is recovering, if not for fully recovered in many regions. And those of you that have taken a flight recently can certainly attest that there's a lot of people out there traveling. I would say that the new normal for the industry is a little bit different than it looked pre-pandemic. Depending on geographies, depending on business models, some airlines are still focused on recovery, especially in terms of the corporate segment that's been a little bit more uneven. I would say, though, that, and this gets to our topic today, many airlines are looking ahead. So one thing that's interesting is the pandemic has been a catalyst for, think of it as traveler centricity. And we think that trend will continue. So if you remember, almost overnight, the refundability and cancellation policies across the world kind of changed in favor of the traveler to allow a lot of those credits to roll forward. And I think that trend of being more kind of focused on the benefits for the traveler will certainly go ahead. The transformation that we're talking about here today, it's certainly a major undertaking, both for airlines as well as the technology vendors that are kind of going down this journey. The message at Sabre that we're hearing from our customers, though, is that we're ready to embark on this modernization journey, and they're looking for technology providers to kind of guide them along the way.
It's great to hear that they're ready. I know, there's been some hesitancy among airlines in areas like NDC adoption, despite this huge opportunity, that $40 billion pot of gold at the end of the transformation rainbow. But this next question is for Daniel. What do you think accounted for that initial hesitancy, that inertia, and why is that starting to change now?
Yeah, I think we need to start out by saying, Darren, that the airline distribution landscape has been quite static for decades, at least from a technology perspective. Not much has really changed, and then NDC came along, which was, I would say, one of the first really big pushes to change things. And we as an industry had to realize that NDC was just more complex than we'd anticipated. While it sounds easy just to put in a couple of new APIs and messaging standards, it's much more than that, or led to more than that, which led to misalignment, led to confusion in the industry, who wants what, who's going to benefit, who isn't. And NDC early on, I think, didn't fulfill some of the promises that were made in terms of simplification, business benefits. And even today, while it's not perfect, it's gotten a lot better. Aspects like servicing and those kind of things have gotten much more streamlined, and so it's gotten better. But looking now forward into the next phase of this transformation, I think the airlines really need to also take a step back and look at where are there opportunities to simplify the business. So the legacy thinking and legacy process, they're still prevalent everywhere, and we need to get rid of some of those. We also know that this transformation is not going to be quick. It's going to take years potentially. And so we need to break it down into manageable chunks, so chunks that we can actually digest and take one step at a time. I think it's really important that we take some of these lessons from NDC, be it, a lack of cross-industry communication that was there, the trying to do everything at once. Take these lessons learned and apply these to the offer order transformation so that we don't make the same mistakes again.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to kind of put this to the test with our audience, just to we talked about readiness, and are airlines more ready today than they were a year or 2 years ago? For our audience, how would you rate your company's readiness for transition to a traveler-centric retailing model? We're going to put the question will pop up on the screen, and then we're going to share the results at the top of our audience Q&A at the end of the session. So we should see those results the question popping up right now. The three aspects of transition readiness, I want to kind of spend the sort of bulk of this discussion talking about, once airlines understand why they need to transform, they need to assess how to get ready for the transformational journey. And so we've broken down readiness into three parts here: strategic, technological, and organizational. So let's start with the strategic aspect of readiness. Daniel, this question's for you again. What should airlines be thinking about as they begin to adopt their strategies for a transition to offer and order-based retailing?
Yeah, look, we're lucky enough to be helping IATA and that modern airline retailing consortium on defining some of these paths and transition ways. And what we've really seen just by working within that group is that no two airlines are alike. No two airlines have the same starting point, nor do no two airlines have the same kind of target state that they want to get to. And if you look at then the whole world, not just the consortium, but there's so many different models and regions and levels of maturities, different aspirations, that it's going to be really hard to define, well, here's the recipe, here's what you need to do. But I think there are a few common themes that we can take out of this. And the common themes are really, how do we realize value with each step that we take? How do we simplify, which can lead to either more efficiencies, cost savings, or whatever? And what are my motivations to change? Am I doing the change for the sake of it because the industry is doing it? Which, by the way, was not uncommon in the earlier days of NDC. Oh, it's a buzzword, we better do it, but no real reason why. And I think here we really need to be a bit smarter and understand what is our motivation to change. And I do think that the airlines see a future in offer and order, but many don't know yet how to get there, nor are they sure how to build that business case to get there, to justify that transformation and to maybe even create some of those motivations. So this whole transformation process, starting with the strategic level and then the organization and then the technology, that's really the key. What is the right process that I should apply to my airline?
Mm-hmm. I think this is a good time to bring in the perspective of our airline guest here. Umesh, what are some of your and Oman Air's motivations for transitioning to this modern retailing? And what are you hoping to achieve?
Thank you, Darren. Well, as a RM lifer, for me, it's always revenue optimization. But surprisingly, when we started our journey in the fall of 2018, the question was, let's go and optimize distribution costs, as most of the discussions around NDC were centered. But halfway through, trying to mature the NDC path, we started realizing, hey, this is not only about cost. It can be a great story on revenue as well. So we started our journey on revenue. How can we optimize revenue? How could we, bring newer products to life? And we started discussing these things with our various tech partners like Sabre. And in that sense, it was quite a journey. And we started off with setting ourselves some certain tasks. So let's not only look at cost optimization, look at improving the revenue. So we are on a good track. We put a strategy together, and we already in high double digits. We're close to in our early 30s, where we're looking at the direct revenues that we are generating, and a substantial part comes from NDC. So there was some obviously learnings that to be made, but when we start looking at IATA's ambition, full offers and orders by end of 2030, I think those are very realistic ambitions, and we fully subscribe to it. So that's why we started taking those were primarily the main motivators for us.
So, that's great. It sounds like you've done a really great job, just establishing a strategic business case already right off the bat. So I think you're ahead of a lot of airlines, perhaps. Let's go back to Mike. Mike, I touched upon this in my introduction, but from Sabre's perspective, how does offer and order retailing drive value for today's airlines and help them meet evolving traveler needs? We've talked about kind of the business case from the airline's perspective, but how does it help them meet traveler needs?
Yeah, no, great question. So I'll say, as we've been kind of thinking through our strategy and how we want to build technology to kind of enable this transition, we've really rallied around what I would call three value drivers or three pillars that we want the transition to unlock for our customers. So that's choice, intelligence, and ease. And what do I mean by that? NDC is an exemplar of a choice enabler. So putting the control back in the airline's hands to distribute the offers across the channels the way they want, ultimately, so the consumers can choose to procure those in the way they want. Better managing all those different channels and customer touch points. Investments in intelligence. So by that, I mean, when you think about that traveler-centric model and what it means to personalize, that gets into really some kind of cutting edge technologies, things like dynamic pricing, allowing kind of experimentation, really bringing the intelligence back into the offer creation, offer management. And we want to enable that with the technology. And finally, ease, just making things easy, right? The fulfillment and delivery, and I applaud IATA for the one order initiative to really move us away from this kind of legacy concept that Daniel talked about earlier of kind of having a manila envelope called your P&R and get towards a more flexible retailing model. If you think about what's the customer's end-to-end travel needs, it doesn't end inside that manila envelope. It's much more about what's the servicing, not just of the trip, but of all the things kind of around the trip. And when you think about kind of the move towards order management and a more flexible kind of model to sell first, third-party content, et cetera, we believe there's tremendous value, not just for our airline customers, but ultimately for the end customer.
Mm-hmm. So this is all great from a strategic point of view. I think we've all made a really good case for why, to answer that first question at the top of the webinar. But next, I just want to focus in on technology, because this is an area that can be a hurdle for some companies. Let's just shift the focus here for a second. So question for Daniel, what technological constraints do airlines face and how can they move beyond those constraints to keep up with consumers and these consumer needs that were just outlined by Mike here?
Yeah, I think that on the technology side, the legacy systems from today, they're often very old, if not in code, then at least in process. People have rewritten things, but still following very legacy processes from 20, 30, and 40 years ago. I think the future tech stack will definitely look very different. I say future, there are already some airlines using much modernized tech stacks. And that doesn't mean just lift and shift something to the cloud. That means really have things that are built as cloud native and take really advantage of what technology can do. So we really need the airline partners, the tech partners, to be ready to support the airlines in this move, to help them also understand what are the benefits of new tech, what can we get out of new tech, be that AI, be that a higher level of automation. And I think to that, there's two critical elements for the airlines to consider continuously, together with the vendors, hopefully, and that's, set a number of guiding principles at the outset. So those can be very simple things, architectural guiding principles, or we want to be an API first company, whatever. They can be much more complex than that. But the other element to consider is modularity. Modularity is going to be the key to agility. And agility is going to be the key to adapting to the constant change that we're going through, even just in this transformation. So I think I mentioned earlier, the transformation could take years. Some airlines think it's going to take them 3, others think it's going to take them 6 or 8 or 10 years. And so we need that agility, that transformation ability. And we need to stick to those guiding principles so we don't veer off the path. And I think we can say, most of the airlines are really trying to improve that retail capability first and foremost. And like Umesh said, they're focusing on revenue, on retail revenue, and looking to move as quickly as possible, I guess, to realize some of that revenue. So the right tech needs to be put in place. So it's just important to get that tech foundation in place, get your guiding principles, and then you can iterate and improve constantly over the next years, however long you decide your roadmap has to be.
Yep. And Umesh, you're on that kind of fast track right now as part of the IATA, Modern Retailing Consortium. What are your thoughts on technology and what you will need to realize Oman Air's vision?
My first thought always was, can we do this quicker? But then you start realizing, Daniel just said it right, start breaking it into small chunks. So, we are really grateful to IATA and also to the other consortium airlines, start this forum so we can fast track and make this NDC technology more friendlier to airlines who haven't yet gone down that path. So when we started participating in the consortium, we realized, breaking it down to small chunks, getting more offer friendly to the customers already sets you down that path. You start generating revenue, getting it early, and at the same time, towards order management, start building your appetite for a new order management system. And it's a journey, it's a path. You look at when NDC started, about 10, 11 years back, of the 250, 270 odd IATA airlines, right? Today, we are at 60, 65, 70 airlines. So it's been a gradual growth, but at the same time, if the airlines start taking steps towards offer management, already it should encourage them that's generating cash, thereby building a strong footing within the airline to have an appetite for a proper order management system. It's going to benefit customers. It's going to bring in incremental revenue, and overall, it's great for the industry. So when I look at it, having gone from 5%, 10, and going towards the higher numbers on the NDC generation side, sky's the limit. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and back on technology just for a minute, Mike. What do you consider from Sabre's perspective to be sort of the core building blocks of a modern retailing tech stack? And by tech stack, I just mean the set of technologies that are needed to power this kind of retailing.
Yeah, no, great question. So I would say we kind of think of it in terms of kind of three items. So the first is strong agreement here about the necessity to be open and modular. So we want the airline to be in control of their tech platform and all the different kind of components. And we frankly think as a software company, it's easier to build that way. And so we get kind of more bang for our buck in terms of development cycles and kind of productivity. I also want to be a little bit provocative in this, but this is not the way the industry has traditionally operated in terms of the booking system has been hard tied to the inventory system, has been hard tied to the ticketing system, has been hard tied to the airports and the payments, et cetera. And all these things have evolved from paper-based processes. So the way we're looking at it at Sabre is this is actually a once in a generation chance to kind of change that whole technology landscape. And we want to be a part of that. A couple of other things I would add, though, is that, look, scalability. So in a future with higher volumes of look to book, shopping requests, kind of offer construction, we think that there's more complexity in terms of building these offers and putting them on the shelves. And so that's why on the technology side, we've made a big investment in cloud technology. Specifically, we have a very public partnership with Google and the Google Cloud platform. But finally, the piece I mentioned earlier about data, artificial intelligence, experimentation, I think the ability for our airline customers to personalize those travel offers and really kind of take advantage of those cutting edge technologies is going to be a game changer. And that's why from the technology side, we started investing in capabilities around what we're calling retail intelligence, but allowing a lot more kind of creativity as the airlines construct these offers and ultimately put them on the shelves.
Yeah, I mean, Sabre's been developing artificial intelligence and machine learning, for a very long time. I know AI is certainly the buzzword of the year, generative AI, but AI has been part of Sabre for a while. This next question for Daniel, I wanted to get your take on AI. What's the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning in all of this? And from your perspective, why should airlines keep AI in mind as they look to develop these solutions?
Yeah, this is a topic you can either just try to cut it out in 1 or 2 minutes or talk about it for days, right? I mean, this is just endless. And I think, Mike touched on a few things, but I would say, AI and ML, they're emerging as potential game changers in our industry. And I say potential just because in our industry, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what could be possible. We've seen it in other industries. And we've seen it partly, revenue management systems in our industry, they've started to apply some of these models more, but we're still not near where we could be. I think part of that is that a lot of airlines are overwhelmed with the possibilities, may lack the understanding of what could be done, and they're also time constrained. I mean, they have an airline to run and don't have time just to sit around and experiment. So I guess they're also looking for the tech vendors like Sabre to support and say, hey, look, here's a use case, here's a couple of use cases. And the big advantage or the benefit the airlines have is they have a lot of data. And data, as we know, it's the key to AI and ML, right? It's feeding those systems with data, historical data, actual data. And so we have that asset. We haven't really taken advantage of using it across the board. And I do think, though, that once that data is sorted, once we have the knowledge in our airlines, once we have those use cases clear to us, I think the possibilities are almost endless in terms of how can we improve customer focus, how can we improve retailing. I mean, there's just so many opportunities to grab once we have sorted, how am I even going to use this? What are the questions I want to ask the data, and how will it help me move forward?
Mm-hmm. Mike, does that align with what Sabre sees as kind of the 3 or 4 top uses for AI and machine learning?
Oh, absolutely. And I would even take it a step further. So, of course, there's a lot of focus right now, including in our organization, on things like dynamic pricing and using AI to come up with better ways to change airfares or availability. We've started getting into the ancillary dynamic pricing world, so coming up with better, more clever ways to price seats, et cetera. But I would also say that if you want to look at the operational side of this, Daniel's right. We've only started scratching the surface with how you can be smarter and use artificial intelligence to come up with better solutions for flight reaccommodation and moving kind of customers through the network when you have those operational issues. And then finally, I'd say this notion of experimentation is really kind of a lesson that you see in other industries in terms of how does Netflix make a different recommendation for what content to watch from person A to person B. They sit on a treasure trove of data and they offer kind of, different recommendations, and they see what the upticks are. And that's the kind of thing that we just haven't had the manpower to do in the traditional airline world for a lot of different reasons, technology, organizational, et cetera. But the new tools that are kind of available to us really open up all sorts of possibilities.
Makes sense. So we got strategy, we got technology. Anna, let's bring up that final. Yes, this next slide, just to remind us of these three pillars. Organizational aspect of readiness. That's another one that a lot of companies have a hard time with. Meeting traveler expectations requires not only technology, but also the organizational culture behind it to offer more flexibility. So, Mike, how can airlines ensure a successful organizational transformation?
Yeah, so we're lucky enough that we get to speak with airline leaders every day. We work closely with many of the big industry experts, consulting houses. You mentioned the McKinsey study earlier. We certainly talk a lot with BCG and others. I would say we're aligned with the general view that of what it takes to successfully transform the org. And there's a couple of things. So I would say it has to start from the top. CEOs and those that are sitting in that executive suite are uniquely positioned in the organization to kind of solicit the buy-in of the entire organization. I mentioned the operational challenges, marrying that with the commercial pieces, et cetera. The CEO has to set ambitious targets, has to build that roadmap to success, and ultimately has to inspire the organization to kind of rally around this cause and really empower the team. And then I would also say, and this is a common theme for us, you have to move beyond that legacy mindset of what does it mean to kind of be managing that P&R and that booking and open and closing fare classes. So especially as you get further into some of these large complex organizations, and airlines certainly are complex, the resistance to change can be a major organizational hindrance. So I would just advocate that leaders at your airlines have to build a culture that embraces kind of a different way of working, test and learn, adaptation to kind of new work environments.
So then, if an organization, is inspired and if they can overcome that legacy mindset, what's next? What are the core capabilities that a company needs to reshape an airline's organizational structure and to align with offer and order retailing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you have to kind of think, and this is something we focus a lot at Sabre, is we don't want to design software to match the organization structure because that becomes a cycle that's really hard to get out of. So as we think through this evolution, you have to kind of be rallied around what does it mean for offer creation and order management at its core. So the airline, we encourage them to build dedicated teams to create and price bundles. So notice I didn't say just airfare or fare class availability. You have to kind of have that mindset of what does it mean to analyze real-time, contextualize offers, and ultimately offer products and services to sell to the most relevant customer segments. I go to, Umesh said earlier, he's an old school revenue management guy originally. I am too. We have to kind of evolve that dark science of revenue management from the capacity optimization and opening and closing fare classes to something more akin to what a retailer would do when you think of how that role needs to expand into the future, to think of kind of the whole offer and how do you optimize the offer that goes in front of the customer. And finally, I'd say data science is a skill set that across our industry has generally been lacking. Few airlines have the competency to build a world-class data science function today, and that's going to change in the next few years. So as leaders look to implement artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these fancy things I'm talking about, you're going to have to invest in your people. You're going to have to invest in data science. And ultimately, those that invest in the people and the technology are going to win, in particular in the offer creation space.
Mm-hmm. Umesh, within Oman Air, how are you getting it done? Who is sponsoring retail transformation within your company, and how are you overcoming that legacy mindset?
It's been quite a journey. moving out of my cape of Lord of Dark Arts. Just, Mike said, old timers in revenue management, having seen LegSeg transitioning 20 years back into full O&D revenue management. Now, when you see the possibilities of what retail transformation presents, when I came back, I remember from one of the distribution council meetings at IATA in Geneva, I came back to the executive team and we presented, and it was equally shocking for people to realize that the old technology, the legacy technology, as we know as EDIFACT, will sunset. Whether it sunsets in 5 years, 4 years, 10 years, that's time will tell. Nobody foresaw what opportunities COVID would bring. So we don't know what opportunities in 5 years we will be. So when I presented this opportunity, I think the first person to put his hand up was our CEO. And he asked a very direct question. He's an engineer by profession. So he says, oh, so do you think the green screen will go? So that's what he still calls it, a green screen. So I said, wow, full marks. So the presentation to him was like, okay, so how much more revenue are you going to bring to the table? So that's how the discussion evolved, and the entire executive team put their weight behind and said, okay, what do you need to start this retail transformation journey? We've been talking about NDC for almost 2 years. Now, what do you need? So practically, I was given the support to bring in people from ground operations, bring in from flight ops, finance, commercial. Obviously, it's a given, right? I mean, revenue management will come into play, reservations, ticketing, sales, all will come into play. That's a given. But for the entire executive team to put their weight behind and say, yes, it's a kind of a PSS transformation. Mm-hmm. So, and we had actually come back from an RFP process on a PSS transformation. We said, hey, we are all very fresh. Why not the complete team get into this retailing transformation journey? So that's the kind of support I have received, and it's not only a revenue focus. It's the entire company behind it. So we are approximately about 38 odd people from different walks of life within the airline, and so we're spending a substantial amount of our time with our potential partners for the future.
Great, thanks so much for laying that out. I know those in the audience may be wondering, where do we start? Maybe we can give them a transition checklist. I know we have a slide prepared for this as well, but Mike, can you walk us through this, and why should these things be on everyone's list?
Yeah, I'd love to, and I want to give a hat tip to Umesh and Oman Air. They've really laid this out, so it just helps me kind of walk down the checklist. So the first I would say is define your strategy. Why do you want to do this? Everything we talked about for the last half hour. You have to communicate the strategy effectively throughout the organization. As I said earlier, it starts from the CEO down, but you got to get that buy-in. You got to get that alignment. And then the third one, and this is where we particularly spend a lot of time, engaging with your technology partner, or really partners, because you've got to create both a product map, but also a technology roadmap built on the new world of next generation retailing, built on offers and orders. And I'd like to reinforce that the successful transformation really depends on working together, both the airlines and the technology providers collaboratively. And you can see it above me together, right? Together, we've got to do this. So bringing the tech vendors in early from the outset kind of supports better planning, more accurate budgeting on the airline side, better kind of resource allocation, all that great stuff. Mm-hmm. The aspects about identifying that required organizational structure that we just spent time talking about, that's critical, right? You're not going to get there if you're still thinking handoff from fare filing to inventory to airports, et cetera. It just doesn't work. And then finally, recruiting, redeploying, even upskilling workers, really investing in the workforce so that you can bridge that gap from how do we sell airline availability and fare classes today to ultimately how do we put offers in front of our customers and all the associated revenue benefits behind that.
I want to do a quick audience poll again. Which aspects of transition readiness will present the biggest challenges for your company? We'll, again, talk about these results at the top of our audience Q&A. By the way, thank you for sending in so many great questions. So many great questions coming through. We'll address as many as we can at the end of the session. So as we move into the last portion of our panel discussion, I want to talk about what the transition path to a modern retailing future could look like at the individual airline level. So Mike, what does a potential transition path look like from your perspective and Sabre's perspective? Walk us through this next slide.
Yeah, and that's we've spent obviously a lot of time talking and building our systems around this. So it's easy to start kind of what's that end state, what's that North Star nirvana, and a lot of the legacy technology at that point is sunset. You're kind of operating kind of on next generation. That's great, but I don't think I could credibly walk into any airline headquarters in the world and say, okay, here's your brand new system. Here's your training manual. Let us know when you want to turn off the old system, and we'll just go ahead and fire this one up the next morning. It doesn't work that way. Everything's too interconnected in this industry. So we're taking a really kind of measured transition approach for that journey to offer and order. And so what I'd say is you look at first deploying a set of kind of technologies side by side. So in terms of what would Amazon have ever become if their transactional model was based around books and solely books 15 years ago, right? And so what I mean by that is, what are the attributes that describe a book? Hardcover, softcover, how many pages, what's the author, et cetera. Well, ultimately, as Amazon transitioned into the retailing world, if they had tried to turn that transaction of what it looks to buy a book into what it looks to buy a t-shirt or a bicycle tire or anything like that, they never would have gotten it. So that's the way we're looking at it, is we're not trying to turn the reservation, the P&R, today's booking into the new world. What we're trying to do is side by side deploy a new set of technology next to it and ultimately help our airline partners transition back and forth. So for the next, call it few years, what we're going to see with airlines is they're going to operate in a hybrid world whereby they can avail themselves of the existing technology, but get into a phased transition where they can start bringing on their partners. And by partners, I don't just mean interlines and co-chairs. I mean the entire ecosystem of revenue accounting providers and catering providers at the airport that are used to kind of the existing way of doing things. And ultimately, what we see in this kind of middle stage in the transition, so call that phase two, is you start getting into a world where I can sell capabilities in terms of that might be something in your loyalty program, that might be a specific set of markets, but I can sell them in the new world. And because I've started walking everybody into over time, I'm operating in this hybrid environment, but over time, I'm pulling capabilities off of the existing system and ultimately bringing them into the new one with the ultimate goal. And then I know Umesh and Daniel can comment on what that timeline could look like, but the ultimate goal should be that we upgrade all the technology and ultimately get towards this new offer order retailing world. Just as in the Netflix world, people went from videotapes to DVDs to ultimately streaming over time. It was both because of technology upgrades, but also because there were tangible benefits to the consumer for doing so.
Daniel, Umesh, what are your thoughts on this path?
Go ahead, Umesh.
Yeah, sure. So, in a way, Mike says, yes, the transition could take years because each airline is going to decide, the speed of transition. Selfishly speaking, for Oman Air, I only wish the transition takes as short a time as possible. Now, we've seen different statements coming from different players in the industry. Very clearly, for example, Finnair said they would want to complete offers and order transition by 100% offers and orders by 2025. I'm sure, one of our consortium partners has said they would like to do it much earlier than 2030. So those are the ambitions of the top 30, top 40 airlines. So I would selfishly say, from Oman Air's perspective, we hope the transition is as quick as possible, because you do not want to have to ride two systems at the same time. Not only it's going to be expensive to maintain, there'll be a lot of hits and misses in between, the PNR sinks. And there'll always be the question, how can I fit the future to look like the past? And that was one of the cornerstones when we started discussing it. How do you want it to be more customer friendly? Let's stop talking about fitting future into the past. And that has been a great engagement, with Sabre and other technical tech partners who've come on site to share their vision with us. And it still comes across pretty much. Some players are talking about mid to long-term transition plans. Some of the tech partners are proposing a shorter transition plan. So that's our hope and the specialist. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Daniel?
I should say, I think it's really important that airlines first of all figure out where is even my starting point? Like what do I have right now and where am I at before trying to figure out where to go? Because I think a lot of airlines are not quite sure, and that's complexity of how long do my PSS or RM contracts last and how do we coordinate certain changes over time? So where am I at? But also what is my willingness to simplify, to change the organization, to change the business processes? Because I think what we don't want is we don't want to recreate the complexity just with new technology. So, my call to action, so to say, to the airlines is where can you simplify parts of your business, parts of your processes, and identify those steps and make sure that those are then built into your transformation process. And I mean, I think Umesh and Mike said kind of all the other elements. Those are just two that I would really like to add to this thinking.
Great. Thanks so much. We have a few minutes left, about 15 minutes left, and I want to turn it over to our audience and address some of these audience questions that are coming in. Before we do that, I just wanted to reveal the results of our 2 polls. The first one was, how would you rate your company's readiness for transition to traveler-centric retailing? And most of the responses are somewhat ready and moderately ready. So I think we have a classic bell curve here. And then the second question, which aspect of transition readiness will present the biggest challenge for your company? The 2 biggest factors were culture and technology. So Mike or anyone else on the panel, any comments about those answers?
I'll take a start at it. Yeah, and certainly as a technology provider, we recognize we have all, not just at Sabre, but this industry has built a lot of kind of layers and integrations into this world of filed fares, fare classes, EDIFACT connectivity, et cetera. I really want to echo what Daniel said, which is and I'll paraphrase, the point of this transition isn't to try to recreate that just on a newer stack. It's really to kind of put the customer in the middle of this and think through what's the best way to provide services to the customer. So when I look at it, yes, the technology and the evolution, that's an impediment, but it's only for me part of the equation. You have to think through, how do you want to, as an airline, how do you want to present your offers to the customers? How do you want to distribute them? How do you want to compute them? How do you want to do all these things? And the technology certainly is a part of that, but it's not the entire story.
Mm-hmm. Let's dive into some of these questions. So here's a question from someone in the audience. In my experience, IT vendors are not known for being particularly open in terms of the solutions they develop. So what made Sabre decide to go that route, and what has the reaction been from airlines? Would love to get, Mike, your perspective, but then also Umesh on this. Yeah,
for sure. So I'll give you our perspective at Sabre, and this is not a travel industry thing. This is what does it mean to be in enterprise software? If I put on my product management hat, you have to be responsive to your customers. If ultimately you're trying to build a set of capabilities and your customers are saying, I want it to be modular and I want to plug in other capabilities, and you're kind of taking the attitude of, no, that's not possible, or no, we don't commercially want to make that viable, then that's not a winning strategy long term. I go to, what does it mean to build software? It means to be building what your customers want. And our customers are telling us they want things to be decomposed and more modular so that they have the optionality around plugging in different components for offer, for order, for delivery at the airport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the biggest kind of reason here.
Mm-hmm. And Umesh, what's the airline perspective on this? Oman Air's perspective.
So so when we started this discussing out primarily with our PSS provider, that's Sabre, We've seen the changes that Sabre has brought about, the newer pieces of tech that they're offering us, more ancillary opportunities, more products that we are able to offer in the direct environment. So that's all customer facing products that we are putting through. So the challenge that we face is, are we able to do things faster? Because today's customer is coming off of different platforms. They're doing in Amazon, they're doing on different e-commerce websites. So they are getting very, very demanding. And it's quite humbling that, as an airline industry, we have to realize we've lagged behind. So we have to catch up on speed and offer new products, offer services what the customer is demanding, and not people of dark art like me and Mike who want to sell a certain product, but also coming from a mindset that, I come from India. So we say, if a customer has stepped onto my store, he needs to buy something. And at the same time, and it's a product that he requires. Time has gone where we as airlines would shove a product down a customer's throat. So give the value to a customer and you will see the money flow. So that's our perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Darren, can I just chime in on that modularity bit? Because there's another thing which I find is interesting. When we're working with airlines, one of the questions comes up is, what does modularity even mean? Like, is it two big components and that's modular, or does it mean I need 100 little components and that's modular? And does it mean that everything has to be from a different vendor? Yes or no, right? And so I think even just stepping back, and I was talking about guiding principles earlier, but well, create a guiding principle for yourself of what modularity means to you, right? And say, well, yeah, we feel we're modular if we have enough flexibility to change things the way our business needs. And I think there's a question that everybody has to ask: what is modularity for me, as opposed to just let's be modular.
Sure. I think that airlines come in different shapes and sizes. This next question from our audience is, what about smaller airlines who lack the resources or struggle to build a compelling business case? Do you see a cost of doing nothing? Anyone jump in on that?
I'll go ahead, Umesh.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's imperative, right? I mean, when we started as Oman Air, we started a journey. It was cost, right? So everything was okay. Let's pull the cost down. Can we optimize the cost? I said at the beginning, we started realizing, no, it's actually a revenue upside. So you choose as an airline what gets the investment initially going. I'm not prophesizing anything, but it's just how we started our journey. And smaller airlines would start their journey based first on cost, nothing wrong with it. Then automatically you would jump on, can I optimize more revenue out of it? That's a bare message. Generate cash so that you can get in front of your executive leadership again and say, hey, listen, this is the time to invest in new tech and start generating more cash.
Yep. Cost of doing nothing. Any comments on that, Daniel or Mike?
I would say that we're all doing this because it's in the customer's best interest, right? They want to sell, or they want to buy different products that are kind of a little bit richer than just the right to get on a plane. And so when you think through the cost of being an early adopter, the cost through working through IT transitions, all that has to be put on the same scale of what is the cost of just not doing this, potentially being left behind by competitors that are being better able to compete in the marketplace. That's frankly how we look at it.
Let me say, Mike, Daniel, sorry to jump in once again. When we talk only about cost of Darren not doing anything, if we don't do it as an industry, as airlines, as partners, somebody's going to do it for us. So whether we accept this in all humility, or we want to take it on our pride, that we owe it to the industry to bring new technology. So airlines, tech partners, whether it's Sabre or it's Travelport or as Amadeus, Pros, Salesforce, anybody along, we owe it to the industry. It's high time we claim the leadership, what we had in 40 years, and there's nothing wrong in learning from the Amazons of the world. Maybe we'll come up with something even better.
Yeah, and I was going to say, even, you know, for the smaller airlines with maybe less resources, be that people or money to invest, it's, you know, there's a lot of things that IATA in the industry is starting to put out there. I mean, the consortium is starting to put material out there to help think about what is the business case. You know, the vendors are doing a lot of work and can offer some coaching. There's companies like ours and others, right, who have a lot of knowledge and experience. So I do think you have to weigh off, if I don't do anything, can I afford to be somewhat behind, and how far behind before I really have to start catching up? And is the cost of catching up going to be even higher in the end? So those are the consideration I put around that.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you all for answering that one so well. The next question is a bit about technology. The lack of homogeneous and a standardized approach is a real challenge. We have different NDC adoption levels, and we have different schema versions. Also, the functionality of NDC is often less than that of the airline APIs, particularly where LCCs are concerned, low-cost carriers are concerned. What does the panel think the industry can do to resolve this real problem?
Yeah, and that's a question coming from somebody who really understands the industry as well. And it is a real problem, right? That alignment, or let's say the alignment of the misalignment. And different speeds, different paces, standards which are kind of standards but can be interpreted in different ways. I think there's going to be a lot of effort going into translation. And I don't mean just purely translating APIs from one language to another, but translating new processes to old processes or legacy processes, translating the speed of how one entity is moving forward to another. It has to be part of everybody's transition plan. How do I work with the environment around me? I can't just stop doing business with my partners because they've decided not to move at my pace. If that could even be my pace is slower, I still need to think about how do I work with my important partners who are moving faster than I am. So for me, a big part of transformation is talking about or thinking about this translation. And again, not just on an API level.
Got it. Why don't we move quickly, unless any of you want to comment on that. I want to move, we have time for one more question. And so I'd like to move on and address this just to give a chance. Let's see, you mentioned Amazon earlier, Mike. This one has to do with Amazon. I never understood why airlines refused to learn from other industries. For example, Amazon, which has been around for about 25 years. Amazon's product portfolio is about 12 million items strong, but with their partners, this rises to more than 350 million items. Most items have an upsell opportunity with reviews from others who bought the item. The average product's price will change once every 10 minutes. So why haven't airlines learned from this and adopted a similar model? What's stopping them from that?
It's a really great point. And I want to acknowledge what Umesh said earlier, which is we need to be kind of humble as an industry and understand what the consumer expectations are and meet them there versus trying to kind of shoehorn the new world into the old world. And Amazon is a great example of that, and the partner ecosystem they've created. A lot of these partners technically are competitors to Amazon, but also customers. They put their merchandise in their warehouse. They use their services to kind of sell side by side against Amazon. And ultimately, the consumer's the winner because of this unbelievable amount of choice they have. So I would take the view that if we as the industry, and it doesn't have to be about Amazon, but you just think of retailing in particular, start with what is the consumer trying to do? They're not, by and large, just trying to buy the right to get on a plane. They're trying to buy an experience, destination Oman, go to Muscat, all these sorts of things. And so if you start there and try to back into, well, how does the technology enable that you get to a much better quality solution.
You guys, I would love to continue talking. I feel like we could continue for another hour, but alas, we're at our end. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to have all of you. Thank you for all the great questions from the audience. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Sabre's modern retailing solution, just scan the QR code or visit sabre.com/open. And be on the lookout in your inbox for a video recording of this session in the coming days. Please share with your colleagues. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.